Odprli lahko. Zdaj pa bo. Zdaj pa lahko. Miro, lahko malo tiše. Če ne bom pa brez telefona. No, Miro mi je prepustil. Bom reči, prepustil, da boste slišali, ne? Miro mi je prepustil to lepo, veselo dolžnost, da vas pozdravim na 8. srečanju slovenskih nabavnih konzorcijev mednarodne znanstvene literature. Tudi tokrat je glavni fokus srečanja na odprti znanosti. Sam koncept odprte znanosti v bistvu ni nekaj zelo novega, ni neka pogruntavščina, ne Miro od 20. in 21. stoletja, ampak v objavljanju, v možnostih objavljanja, v možnostih razširjanja rezultatov znanstveno-raziskovalnega dela. Če pogledamo knjižnice, na nek način stoletja so povezana s konceptom odprte znanosti. Končno, ena od najbolj demokratičnih mest za dostop do rezultatov znanstveno-raziskovalnega dela se trudimo v vsej zgodovini, da so ti rezultati znanja čim širši.
services. Hvala lepa. Lepo pozdravljeni še v mojem imenu. Priklopil bom v angleščino. Čeprav so zakonodaja, vemo kakva je, ampak imamo tuje goste, tako da predlagamo v angleščini, če so kakšni problemi, vprašajte, pomagamo. So, we will switch to English. Thank you very much, Melita, for this introduction speech. And I just want to share with you some technical issues. First, Internet, wireless, I hope it functions, so there is a password and authentication data. Then hashtags for Twitter, Facebook, please tweet, please share this information from our event today, and also questions. Basically, we would like to do this event today as much as possible interactive. We would like to involve audience to our talks, discussion, and there are a few possibilities to put questions. One was during the registration. We got some questions. We'll try to clear and answer during the panel session. Then there is a table. If you want, you can write some questions. And there is also Slido. Probably we will play a game today with Slido. You have data there. www.slide.do, event code 7509. Those data are also on Leaflet, so you can use this data to enter Slido and put a question there. Questions are anonymous, and we will try to answer those questions. And also, this is something new about, a new approach maybe to put questions to our speakers. So, on the end of this introduction, I want to thank once again to all our speakers and especially to our, let's say, sponsors and co-organizers, Clarivate Analytics, Elsevier, and also Scientific Knowledge Services. Melita mentioned positive vibration by Tiberius and his team. So yeah, we thank you very much for your assistance and help to have this event. I hope that sound is okay. No? Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Then we will maybe, just a moment, some technical problems. No, I suggest that we switch off television if possible. Yeah, just before we start. Maybe we switch off. Okay. We can now start. Maybe our technical staff will try to set those problems. But I will represent our first speaker, Dr. Paul Ayris. Dr. Paul Ayris is coming from University College London. He's, if I try to list all positions Paul had in his career, this take maybe half an hour. So I will just say that, okay, officially Paul was director of University Library UCL. Also, he was a president of LIBR, member of or co-chair of LERU organization. But what is the most important, Paul is one of the early beginner of open access movement in Europe and also globally. And he has great experience with new ideas, so we invite him every time here to share these new ideas with us. And this year is very special. Probably you know Slovenia signed Plan S, and probably Paul will talk also about this. Please, Paul, it's your chair.
I'm having trouble getting the PowerPoint to remain on the screen. Perhaps I'm pressing the wrong button. Okay. Of course I am. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Are you okay if I sit, or would you like me to stand and talk? Can you hear now if I speak like this? I will sit then and maybe get up and walk around during the course of the talk. So thank you very much for the invitation to come back to Ljubljana. I'm terribly impressed that so many people are in the room at 9:15 in the morning. This will not be possible in London, where I work. Nobody would come to a meeting before 10 o'clock. So I'm jolly impressed you're all here at 9 o'clock on the dot. I mean, that's a strange British custom not to start work in formal meetings before 10 o'clock. What I'm going to talk about is open science and universities, and I thank Mira for his very kind and generous introduction to the talk. And really, I'm going to keep it very simple. I'm going to try and analyse what open science is, what we in LERU, the League of European Research Universities, that's 24 research-intensive universities in Europe, what we think, what our rectors think, this is what the rectors think, open science is. We'll then look at what we consider to be the most important element in moving to an open science future, and that is the cultural change that is required in each of our universities in order to change what we do. And again, this is the view of the rectors, our 24 rectors, university rectors. I'll then go quickly through the 8 pillars of open science as defined by the European Commission, and give some views from LERU, from the League of European Research Universities, what needs to change in each of those 8 areas if you're going to embrace open science. And then I'll try and draw this to some sort of conclusion. So first of all, what do our rectors think, these 24 rectors who run research-intensive universities across Europe? How have they defined open science? Well, they have embraced the 8 pillars of open science as defined by the European Commission. This is the roadmap that the rectors want to adopt. So these are the 8 pillars, the future models of scholarly communication. Then 2 pillars around research data, so the European Open Science Cloud, and then making your data fair. Then there's a piece around skills and knowledge and development, a piece around research practice and integrity. Then the 6th pillar is about rewards and promotion. How do you, as an individual researcher, get rewarded for engaging in open science activities? The 7th pillar is about altmetrics, which is a bit of a confusing title in English, because altmetrics is really the name of a commercial product, and that's not really what this pillar is about. It's really about the use or non-use of bibliometric indicators. I have quite a bit to say about bibliometrics in the talk. And then the final section, the final pillar, is on citizen science. So these are the 8 pillars that the LERU rectors have started to work on, or asked the members of their working groups to start working on in terms of implementing open science practices. So we have produced an open science roadmap for universities. I chaired the working group for LERU that produced the roadmap. And this is the URL of the roadmap, and obviously it's an open access document. And in it we make, I'm afraid, a total of 41 recommendations to universities about how to move along the road for cultural change, and how what changes need to be made in each of those 8 pillars if you're going to adopt open science practices. So let's start with the main contribution, I think, that the LERU roadmap makes. What do we mean by cultural change in the context of open science? Well, the Leru rectors have defined it as looking something like this. If you're going to embrace open science, if you're going to make your university a leader in open science activities, you need to do three things. You need someone to lead the change, someone who's got overall responsibility for open science. You then need to manage those changes, probably with a series of recommendations and agreed changes in your institution. And you need to engage with all your stakeholders, with students, with academic staff, with researchers and with administrators as well, since some of the areas of open science are around professional services, not only academic activity. So what the Leru rectors are saying is that the cultural change, the change that's needed at university level, it can't be done by a top-down mandate or simply be done by a top-down mandate, and it can't simply be the rector or the university librarian telling people what to do, because that won't work. You won't get the engagement and you won't get the levels of management in order to deliver that change. So these three activities, leadership, management and engagement, need to be present in order to get cultural change, real change, embedding change in your institution. And that's not unique to open science. That would be a typical model for how you introduce change at a university, by engaging in all these three levels. And then you have three enabling activities that will deliver the message that you want to be delivered. And here I've listed them as the three I's. You need to inspire people. You need to give them information. They need to know what's happening and they need to be part of that change process and not feel that change is just being something that's being done to them and they don't have any control over it. And the message needs to be integrated, so it has to cover all stakeholders in the university landscape in order to be successful. And if you wanted a four-step plan for how you would introduce that cultural change, it would look something like this. And this is the model that the Leru universities, the 24 Leru universities, are going to adopt. You appoint someone with leadership and hopefully with vision, who will lead the strategy. And in my institution, that's me. So I'm not only the university librarian in London, I'm also the lead person for open science across the whole university. So not just in the library, but across all the areas of the university, looking at those 8 pillars of open science that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And in each of those 8 areas, you develop targeted measures that you want to introduce. And I'll describe some of the things we have done and some of the things we are going to do in my institution and in Leru in order to deliver an open science future. You have to implement all these changes with transparency, and you have to be accountable to all the stakeholders, and you have to monitor performance. Many universities are very good at making plans, but very bad or relatively bad at implementing them and monitoring them. So they're good at vision, they're very bad sometimes at implementation. But in order to deliver open science change, you have to implement, and then you have to monitor the pace of change to see whether you're being successful or not. And whilst you're doing all this change, which is not everybody's favourite word in a university, you have to retain the trust and confidence in all the parties you're talking to or who are acting in this change process. So it is a very diplomatic role. A lot of it is about politics and diplomacy to make sure that everybody is on the same page, as we say in English, that everybody is thinking the same thing, is happy to be going on this journey, and then implementing your targeted measures. So to deliver cultural change, Leru would make these 4 major recommendations, as I say. To appoint a senior manager to lead open science approaches, and as I say, in my university that happens to be me at the moment. To develop your program of cultural change in all these 8 areas of open science, which the Commission has defined, so that you know what change you're trying to bring about. One of the underpinning activities in delivering this change is to develop university-wide advocacy programs, which might consist of workshops like this one today, where you're engaging with your stakeholders and trying to encourage them to think new things or to think differently. And a sign of success is that they leave the room thinking something different from the way they thought when they came in. If they leave the room and think the same thing as they did when they arrived, then that's not success, because you haven't changed their views. You haven't started that cultural change. You want to excite them, to inspire them, to challenge them in order to change the way they look at the way research and education are done and delivered in your university. And then you've started the progress of instituting cultural change. And then you need to develop the fourth recommendation we make, the overarching recommendation, is to deliver a communications strategy. Workshops is part of that, which will enable the whole university body to become familiar with what open science means and how it will affect them in their daily lives. So that's the overarching programme, designed to deliver, as the first step, the cultural change that's required to embrace open science. So once you've done the cultural change piece, or you've started the work on the cultural change to change people's attitudes and to make them think, or invite them to think differently about what they're doing. What are the 8 pillars of open science? What do they look like? What changes do you actually want to make on the ground to deliver your open science program? So these are the 8 pillars, and I'm going to briefly, very briefly, go through all 8 of them in the next 15 minutes or so, and then finish the talk by trying to draw some conclusions from the work we've done in Leru and in my university to start not only the cultural change, but also the practical changes to deliver open science approaches in each of these areas. So the first one is the future of scholarly communication, and the Leru roadmap makes 5 recommendations in this area. And the example I'm going to give is the example of my university press. In UCL, we have started an open access university press. There are leaflets here about UCL Press activities on the SKS stand. Here in the hall, SKS is our European representative for UCL Press activity. We are the UK's first fully open access university press. And when I talk to my academics, when we started the press about 4 years ago, well, the discussion started at least 4 years ago, we identified these benefits. If we were to set up an open access university press in UCL, what would be the benefit of doing that? What difference would it make? And these were the points that they made. It would be consistent with the open access, the open science agenda, so that bottom box in the middle column, and on the left-hand side at the bottom, it would add a reputational value to the university through global dissemination of our outputs and reach audiences that the university might not otherwise reach. And in practice, after 3 years of operation, that is one of the main reasons why the university is supporting the press financially by paying for the running costs on a year-to-year basis, because of the greatly enhanced reputation that the university has gained through publishing open access monographs through the press. We published 70 books now since we started in 2015. And in May this year, we passed the 1 million downloads. And on present projections, we will maintain downloads of at least 1 million downloads each year because of the number of books that we're publishing and the fact that in an open access environment where your main output is digital, they're never out of print. They're never unavailable. They're always available, and there will always be audiences wanting to read them. So that I'm confident that we will get at least 1 million downloads each year. So we're planning a big party, or at least I'm planning a big party later in the well, probably early next year actually, as a New Year party to celebrate our million downloads. And we're downloaded in 222 countries. In fact, then this slide is slightly out of date. We're now downloaded in 225 countries. There aren't any more countries in the world, so we are downloaded in every single country and territory in the world. Even in North Korea, we have 15 downloads in North Korea. I don't know what they're downloading, or perhaps I should check what they're we don't publish science textbooks, so I don't think our nuclear secrets are under any threat from 15 downloads in North Korea. I think they're mainly arts and humanities titles, actually, about Western culture. And that's the single most important message to get across to your rector or to your university, and that's why my provost and president is so supportive of the press, because of the number of countries in which UCL Press books are being downloaded, because many of these are countries where we wouldn't have a presence and where we wouldn't expect to attract students to come and study with us, either as undergraduates or as postgraduates. So the global impact that the press makes is really a major driver for change at an institutional level, which is why the press is so popular. This press is so popular in my university. Of course, there are other ways of delivering scholarly publishing futures, and Miro mentioned Plan S. I'm sure this will come up in the discussion later on today. This is a plan by Science Europe with the support of the Commission, an extremely challenging and bold plan that after the 1st of January 2020, all results from research funded by public grants must be published in open access journals or on compliant open access platforms. And one of the results of that would mean that hybrid publishing in hybrid journals is not compliant. And so your researchers, and my researchers, will not be able to publish in what are called high impact factor journals after the 1st of January 2020, because those journals, at the moment, unless the journals change their publishing model, will not be compliant with the funder requirements. And so you will not get future funding. You will not get European funding from the Commission, from Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, or from the European Research Council. And I understand your Slovenian research funder has also signed the declaration, so you won't get national funding. Your researchers will not get national funding because the outputs in hybrid journals after the 1st of January will not be compliant with funder requirements. So that's a very bold move by Science Europe. There's this collection of European funders and could absolutely be a game changer as far as the future of scholarly publishing is concerned, if it's successful. And maybe we should talk about that in the discussion later on today. Let me look briefly at the other pillars of open science, just so you see the breadth of the program that my university and Leru universities are starting to implement. So the next two pillars are about research data, the European Open Science Cloud, got 4 recommendations in the Leru roadmap, and fair data, the making your data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. That got 6 recommendations in the report. As far as the European Open Science Cloud is concerned, work is mainly developing across Europe in these 3 areas, looking at culture, data cultures. I talked about cultural change at the start of the talk, and here it is reflected again in the specific moves that need to be undertaken and changes that need to be implemented in order to change the way that people think about their research data. So the data culture and making your data fair, looking at the platforms and the infrastructure that's required to store and make your data available openly for sharing and reuse, if that is the position you want to take. And then the administrative machinery and the agreements that are needed in order to fund those developments and the development of those platforms. So those are the 3 areas where EOSC, European Open Science Cloud work is being done. And of course, the aim of the European Open Science Cloud is to deliver an Internet of Things, one search engine, one front end anyway, that will find everything, publications, software, research data, and all other research outputs that are open and compliant with open access and open data principles. And the Commission feels this will completely change the way that research is done in Europe and make Europe much more competitive as a result. How do you get to that position where you are able to deliver data and publications to the European Open Science Cloud? Well, you could follow this kind of plan here that we have in my university, in UCL. We're following the outputs of the LEARN project. LEARN is was an EU-funded LEARN project looking at proper research data management practice, and we produced a toolkit of best practice to guide institutions that were beginning this journey to make the change from thinking only of publications as a research output to thinking about research data as equally important as publications. One of the first things you can do, one of the best things you can do, is to develop an institutional research data management policy, and we deliver in the LEARN toolkit a template, a model research data management policy, which you can use as a template for devising your own policies. In my institution, we do have a research data management policy, and the default position is that, well, the default position that the policy takes is that all data should by default be open, unless there are reasons why it can't be. So open is the norm rather than the exception, and it mirrors the Commission's statement that data should be as open as possible, as closed as necessary. Not all data can be open for very good reasons, but where it can be open, it should be open and available for sharing and reuse, because that's good for research. It enables verification of research results by checking not only the publication and the conclusions, but the building blocks on which those conclusions are based. That is the underpinning research data. The fourth of the 8 pillars of open science is skills, and in LERU, the League of European Research Universities, we've taken the view that the first community to engage with is the doctoral community of our research students. So where all LERU universities are introducing open science skills programs into the postgraduate training programs that we offer. And my university, this is a picture of one such training session in one of my libraries in UCL in London. It's library staff who are asked to deliver a lot of this training. So the library has a really important role in not only in the publishing arena. UCL Press is part of the library after all, so that's one area in which the library is involved in open science, but also in training and advocacy. And with training early career researchers, the library is the main lead in delivering those training programs. And our experience is that early career researchers are extremely enthusiastic about open approaches in a way that maybe their more senior supervisors, their PIs, principal investigators on projects might not be quite so enthusiastic. Young people are very enthusiastic about change when you explain what the benefits of that change are. So in our doctoral school, my opposite number, David Bogle, who's Vice Provost for the doctoral school, in charge of PhD education in UCL, has asked me to work with him to make open science the norm in training early career researchers rather than the exception. So one of the key aspects of studying at UCL or doing doctoral research at UCL will be that you are trained in open science practices and encouraged to think that open science is the norm, the future of research activity. The fifth pillar of the Commission's programme of 8 pillars is on research integrity. And here it's fairly straightforward. You need to have a research integrity code that embraces open science. So if you have an institutional strategy, we have an institutional research integrity code in UCL. We have inserted references to open science in that code as being the expectation of how, all things being equal, research is undertaken and the results shared and made available for verification by other researchers. So that's all going into our Research Integrity Code. If you haven't got an institutional code, there are European codes which make the same point, which you could adopt. And the Leroux's suggestion is that you choose the ALEA code, which does respect open science principles, if you don't want to draw up your own code. The sixth pillar is about rewards. How do you, if you're asking researchers to make major changes in the way they work, to value their research data as equally as they value their publications, to share their data, to share their publications, to make these requirements of funding from funding bodies, how do you reward them? What's the way you actually help change the way they perceive open science approaches? One of the ways is about looking at your rewards and promotion structure in your institution, and the Leroux roadmap makes 6 recommendations in the rewards space, and we're suggesting that you should insert open science principles into your career frameworks and develop institutional policies that reward individuals who follow open science practices. And this needs to apply at all the points in the HR system. So when you appoint researchers or lecturers in the first place to your institution, when you promote them, when they're going through the career path in the institution by being promoted through the various grades, and in the annual appraisal process. So since in my university we have an annual appraisal process where all researchers, and me too for that matter, are evaluated every year against a set of criteria. I have included I managed to insert openness and open approaches into our new academic promotions framework. So this was under review for a year, and there was a very wide consultation on what the future shape of the promotions framework should be. And I attended some of the workshops, rather like the workshop here today. And I suggested that we insert open approaches into the criteria against which academics are assessed when they're applying for promotion. And my Vice-Provost research, so I work for him as part of the Vice-Provost Researcher's Office, he inserted a very strong statement in the promotions framework that UCL had signed DORA, the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, which doesn't allow the use of false metrics to be used to make decisions about promotion or tenure. And in particular, it doesn't allow the use of journal impact factors to be a criterion for saying this person should be promoted because they published in a journal with a high impact factor, because impact factors have absolutely nothing to say about individual articles. They don't tell you anything about academic excellence in individual articles. They shouldn't be used as criteria for promotion or actually for appointment if you're looking at individual research outputs. So we introduced all these statements and practices into our promotions framework, and I thought, well, and it went out to consultation, because we're very democratic. It went out to academic consultation. I thought, I'm bound to get a lot of criticism because I've aligned the promotions framework with open science principles, and that's new and different. I'm bound to get complaints from academics about that. Well, when the academic promotions framework went out for consultation, there were some complaints, but none of them were about open science. In fact, I got absolutely no criticisms about open science. The comments we did get were actually, if I may say so, particularly academic ones, about what job titles should look like. So there's a big fuss about job titles. Should I be called a reader or assistant professor? There was a great deal of discussion about that, which I thought, okay, that's fine, that's an important discussion to have. But there are absolutely no criticisms about introducing openness as a criterion for promotion, and that went through. So this is now policy. Our policy is an open access policy. It's available on the website. So we've done this for promotions. What my job is now in the next 12 months is to introduce this into the other two areas of HR activity. So that's in appointments, so when you appoint somebody to UCL in the first place, and in the annual appraisal procedures. But since we've got it in promotions, it would be odd not to be able to introduce it to appointments and appraisals. So I'm not expecting too much kickback when I do this. I'm talking to our Director of HR at the moment, who's very supportive about moving to this approach, so I don't anticipate any difficulties, touch wood, in that area. Let me quickly run through the last two areas of open science as defined by the Commission then, and then try and draw some general conclusions. So this piece about alt metrics, which as I suggested earlier, is really a rather unfortunate name, because alt metrics is the name of a commercial product, and I don't think that's what the Commission intended when they used it. There are 4 recommendations about this. One of to illustrate the problem or the challenge, there aren't any problems, there are just lots of challenges. To illustrate the challenge about the culture in universities of the current use of research metrics, I circulated a questionnaire, a short questionnaire for HEFCE. HEFCE is was our funding body, the Higher Education Funding Council for England. They manage the research evaluation process in UCL, which in the UK, which is a national research evaluation activity that happens every 6 or 7 years. And they asked me to draw up a questionnaire looking at the impact of open science approaches in this area of the responsible use of metrics. So I drew up a very short questionnaire. The results are available as in our UCL repository as an open access output. And the report is now, the full report from the working groups available as well. We got 96 responses, so that's about 2/3 of all the universities in the UK, and that's quite a large response rate for a HEFCE questionnaire, which shows that there is a good deal of interest in this particular topic. And one of the findings of the questionnaire was that this issue of cultural change came up again. Cultural change is needed if you want to change the form of evaluation, and don't use traditional metrics like journal impact factors or the reputation or perceived reputation of the name of the journal, making your research automatically a high quality piece of research. These are not open science principles, they are embedded in the current process. Let me just give 2 examples of the questions that I asked and what the results were. So question 1 was, does your research organisation have a research metrics policy? So remember, there were 96 responses. 75 of the responses said no, their university didn't have a research metrics policy, which is pretty awful really when you consider that they're using these metrics for years or decades in order to deliver quite important outputs or outcomes like promotion and research ranking. And yet they didn't have a policy which explained what the good use of research metrics was. So maybe you should think about your university and your research institute and whether you have a research metrics policy which sets the framework for the responsible use of metrics in your organisation. And another question, question 2 actually, was, has your research organisation signed DORA, the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, which doesn't allow the use of journal impact factors as a measure of quality for individual articles? And 21 said yes, and mainly those were LERU institutions, LERU institutions in the UK, because LERU has signed the DORA declaration. But 75 said no, They hadn't. So when I queried them, they said, well, we haven't signed, but we are thinking about it. I suspect they said, we're thinking about it because I asked the question. I'm not completely sure they would have all been thinking about it if I hadn't asked the question. So you see, that is the current state of play, which is not open science friendly and not open science compliant, and requires an enormous culture change if you're going to change the way that research is evaluated and appreciated by changing the way you measure academic success. The last area I'll touch on very briefly is citizen science. LERU recognizes citizen science as an evolving set of research methods that engage with society as a whole and therefore are good for the university, reasserting the role of universities in society. And the LERU roadmap recommends creating a single institutional point of contact for citizen science. And that's what we're aiming to do in my institution. So Professor Muki Hackley, in one of our academic departments, is going to be the lead, we hope, going to be the lead for citizen science across the institution. And he will use the library as his office in the sense that we will employ staff to support him to deliver citizen science activities across the institution. So I've explained the need for cultural change. I've looked at the 8 pillars of open science and looked at the strengths and challenges of each of those areas in changing current practice. What is the final conclusion that the LERU roadmap for open science actually identifies? Well, this is a roadmap, a pan-European roadmap, a rather elderly pan-European roadmap. It's the Hereford Mappa Mundi. It's a medieval map. I'm a historian, so I like to use historical analogies. This is the most important European map to exist from the Middle Ages, and it was drawn. The map was drawn in Lincoln, which is a cathedral city in northern England, around 1300. The scribe clearly hadn't travelled very far because he got his names muddled up on the map. And if you can identify the continents on the map, you'll see that when he's talking about Africa, he calls it Europe. And when he's talking about Europe, he calls it Africa. And that's because he probably hadn't travelled very far from Lincoln, but had heard things and decided that he wanted to try and represent these things on a map, but got rather muddled up in the process. For those who can recognise it, that is England, as it exists on the map, right at the edge of the known world in 1300. And who knows, after Brexit, we may end up being there again. But that would be another talk. This isn't really a roadmap, because at the centre, you couldn't use it to travel from A to B because you'd easily get lost, which is why the scribe has mixed up Africa and Europe. What it is a theological statement, because right at the centre of the map, in the centre here of the map, is Jerusalem and the Holy Land, which surrounds Jerusalem. It is actually not a roadmap, but a theological statement about the importance of Christianity and Christian belief in the Middle Ages, in 1300. And all the countries revolve around Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is the centre of the world in this man's thought view and in the thought world of the medieval European church around 1300. What we're suggesting is that you don't put Jerusalem in the centre of your known world, you put open science in the centre of your known world. That's the principle behind the LERU roadmap, and you'll get exactly the same result, because open science will then permeate all areas of your activity and embrace all the stakeholders who are engaged. So if you have been listening, thank you very much, and I'm very happy now or later in the day to answer any questions or hear any comments you might have to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. It was a great presentation, as always. We have time maybe for a question or two, but later on the panel you will have chance also to put question to our distinguished guest. So if there is any questions in the audience? Not for now. I have one question.
Okay.
About advocacy.
Yes.
I think that advocacy is the most important, let's say, issue when we talk with researchers about something new, about something which is not in the focus currently of researchers. How do you approach at your university? I know that you have a very systematically system of advocacy, but how do you approach? What is your strategy?
Okay, so the way we do it in my university, and many research universities in the UK do the same, we have, as I said, we have a national evaluation framework called the REF, Research Evaluation Framework, which dictates how millions of pounds of money come into the institution, because the results in terms of the excellence of your institutional research dictate the amount of money you're given by the funding body. And it's a requirement of the funding body that all the outputs that you submit to the Research Evaluation Framework have an open access version. It's not compliant unless there's an open access version, and in a way it's a slightly weaker version of Plan S. That's always been the case. It's been the case for a number of years that these research outputs have to have an open access version. So we have developed a large advocacy activity in my library where Catherine Sharp, who runs our open access office, has a team of open access officers who go out to departments and faculties and research groups to talk about open access and what steps academics need to take in order to comply with the REF open access mandate. And I look at the list of meetings and workshops and talks that her team gives, and it's literally hundreds of talks in the course of an academic year. Practically every week there are one or two activities going on. The result of that has been that open access is incredibly popular in my institution because we've done the advocacy, built up over a number of years, and academics know that the library is their friend in the open access space and will always give them sound advice. It won't always be the advice they want to hear because they may have to change the way they do things, but it will be sound advice and it will be supportive advice, and they will tell them what they need to do. So open access and so the UCL Press, one of the reasons it's so successful in my institution is that we build on the advocacy that we've done for open access with these hundreds of meetings every year to change the culture at institutional level. And there is no other way of doing it other than building up. The transition from where we are now to open access and open science is a process which will take several years. It doesn't happen overnight, and you couldn't expect it to happen overnight. And I don't expect the move to open science to happen overnight, but it's built on advocacy and trust and engaging with your community, as you say. That's the most important thing to do at the start. And that starts the cultural change that I've talked about that will lead to these individual changes in each of the areas of open science going forward.
Thank you. Any question from the audience? Yes, please, Anna. Just a moment.
So my question is regarding one issue that was pointed to me by other researchers when I talk with them about open science and open access, and they ask, so isn't this like harming maybe research collaboration with institutions that don't have an open access policy? Because, for example, at our institution we have it, but maybe we collaborate with another institution in another country that doesn't support open science, and how to deal when you come to a situation when you want to publish something in open access, but your collaborators don't want. So if you have any recommendation, advice, experience about that.
Sure. Well, I can suggest a couple of things that would help. So let's go back to Plan S. I think we will probably be talking about Plan S this afternoon in the general discussion, at least I hope we will. One of the objectives of Plan S, which has been delivered by Science Europe, is to get everybody in Europe on the same page. So when your funder, especially if you're an international funder, like the Horizon programs, Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, or the European Research Council, are funding collaborations across national boundaries. And they require open access as a given in order to deliver, to be compliant with the funder requirements. That will drive change. The vision of the Commission is that will drive change in those European countries that don't currently embrace open access or are lukewarm on open access. Because if you don't do that, if you don't make your outputs open, you won't get funding next time round. And for this scientific medical research across national borders, it's unthinkable that research can happen without external funding. So Plan S and all the international funders who are signing up to Plan S is potentially a game changer that will address the question that you're asking. What do you do where not everybody is at the same page? That one of the drivers behind Plan S is that everybody should be on the same page and at exactly the same spot, and take a very proactive view and positive view about adopting open access principles.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much, Paul, once again. And
Pleasure. Okay.
So, our next speaker today is Ms. Colleen Campbell. Hello, Colleen. Well known.
Just a moment.
Yeah. Colleen is, works for Max Planck Institute. She leads partner development in Global Open Access 2020 initiative.
I have a pocket.
And she is very experienced in this sector. Works for Portico, JSTOR, and other publishing companies through years. So, please, Colleen, it's your just a moment.
Thank you. All right. Can you hear me okay? Sound is okay? Yes. All right, good. Okay, I'm Colleen Campbell from the Max Planck Digital Library in Munich, Germany. I want to start, how many of you were at this forum last year and already heard me speak about the Open Access 2020 initiative? Ah, do you remember everything I said? No. Okay. Well, last year was a bit of an introduction to OA 2020 and what we're trying to achieve. And this year, I will dig a little bit deeper into the roadmap that we adopt and we encourage other institutions to adopt, okay? So we'll do a bit of a review, but we'll dig deeper. How can we solidify the foundations of our open access efforts? Open access is one segment of the open science picture. We at the Max Planck Digital Library and the OA 2020 initiative that we are coordinating is focused strictly on open access, okay? A comprehensive open access strategy. How many of you here deal directly with open access in your work at your libraries, institutions? Some of you. How many are involved in licensing electronic resources? Okay, a bit here and there. My talk today will talk a lot about that, but starting off, I'm borrowing this roadmap, which is called the 5 Pillars of Open Access, and we will see them in a moment, from the Dutch Wezenau roadmap to open access. So let me see if you can guess, well, maybe you can guess, what are some of the pillars of an open access strategy? The first one here is archiving. Do you have institutional repositories? Are you encouraging your researchers to deposit their works in them? Yeah, okay, so check. We've got the archiving. Alternative publication platforms. Are you investing like UCL in creating your own publishing venues or looking at new ways of publishing outside of the traditional journal even? Can we check that box? Okay. International collaboration. I think today we're already doing that. So communicating, working across borders, seeing what your colleagues are doing, participating in organizations like LIBER or the EUA and or the European the European Commission and collaborating across borders. I think we're all doing that. Monitoring what's happening in open access. I know you are doing some monitoring because I've seen some of your work, so that's great. And now we are at the last pillar, which, in case you can't guess what it is, publisher negotiations. Now, Paul brought up a few points in his talk, specifically referencing Plan S. And I think this is where we really have an area that libraries can help push the drive to open access. And so I'm going to talk primarily about that today, okay? Transformation roadmap. These are some of the steps that libraries who are part of the OA 2020 initiative have adopted to accelerate the transition to open access, because that's what we were about. Last year, if we remember from my talk, we spoke about how today, still under 20% of articles are published immediate open access. So that's a huge gap. We've got 80% of content still locked behind paywalls. What can we do to accelerate our efforts? That's what OA 2020 is all about. And these are just some steps that you might want to think about as you think about what you can do to accelerate the transition to open access. So we're going to build our pillar as we talk through this roadmap. Understand the relevance of open access publishing already at your institution. This is the first step, because we as librarians, if you're dealing with electronic resources, you think about subscriptions. When you think of a publisher, you think about licensing. But there is a relationship that your institution has with publishers that you as librarians may not really be aware of. You only see the subscription part, the access part. We need to understand, I showed this already last year, we as librarians need to understand the open access publishing that is already happening. You see here, these are the top 20 publishers by number of articles published. And you see among the top 20 already, how many have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these are open access publishers. So if you are a librarian and you believe that you're maintaining the relationship with publishers on behalf of your institution, I don't know. Do you know what's happening with HDMI or, HTPI, Hindawi, Frontiers, PLOS? Are you aware of these relationships that your researchers have with these publishers? Here we've included NPG already as an open access publisher because of the quantity of content that is in fact published open access on their journals. It's reached already 70%. Looking at the journal, largest journals by number of articles published, we see that 8 of these are pure gold open access journals. Indeed, this is already data from last year, but I think this has actually shifted. You have Scientific Reports, which has surpassed PLOS One, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if you can see very clearly the image here, but what this is showing is, whereas we who are involved in licensing might think about what are the important publishers, what are the important journals, that picture might not necessarily correspond to the importance that our researchers are giving to journals that are actually gold open access. And this, what lesson is really important here is a lot of these, or most of these journals are based on an APC business model. So this corresponds to money that is flowing through our institutions via our researchers to the publishers. It's something that we need to think about, because part of our role, if you're dealing with electronic resources, is getting the best deal for my institution's money, right? So if this is happening without your being aware, that is a gap that I think needs to be filled. We need some centrality to help manage that relationship with the publishers. Paul referenced before the concept of impact factor. And what does that mean in terms of publishing in hybrid journals? I wanted to show this data point, which comes from Delta Think, which is a data analytics company. We've looked at, here we have the SNP, and across here, the APCs. And we're comparing gold, open access, with hybrid publishing, okay? I don't know if it's really, if you can see very clearly the colors, but what I think this reveals is the fact that the SNP, there is no real direct correlation between SNP and the cost of an APC. It's fictitious, actually, right? Of course, we have some outliers. We have some high impact or higher impact journals are a little bit more expensive than APCs, but generally, that's not the issue, indeed. So this needs to be kind of a warning to us that hybrid APCs are inflated, and we need to do something about this. But individual researchers who are paying them, I mean, how can they do that on their own? We need a librarian to step in and get a global picture of what's happening in order to manage this and put in some monitoring and cost control to these APCs. Which leads me to the next point, monitoring and analyzing your publication data and looking at the finances behind that. As we build this pillar, we need some leverage, right? We need some leverage to create our pillar. And what is the leverage that we have? The money. Money is the leverage. We are paying increasing amounts of money for subscriptions, investing our institutional funds in paywalled access. But that's not even the full picture of what's happening. Perhaps you're not aware that authors, when they publish, they have to pay, in addition to an APC, if they publish in gold journals, they're paying for color charges, they're paying for page charges. This is all money that's flowing through your institutions without our knowledge. And even more money now as we have hybrid OA publishing and gold open access publishing. So what we think is happening, the budgets that we are spending, it's actually a much bigger picture. So if we can get a full picture of what's happening in terms of the finances, that is going to give us stronger leverage when we decide to negotiate a transformative agreement. I referenced before, Miro and his colleagues, you've done some work in analyzing the hybrid and open access publication at your institutions across Slovenia for a number, And so this is just, there is a link there to the report. If you've not seen it, I recommend looking at it. And this is just the top level picture. All OA articles, the number of APCs paid, the average APC. So we see, in fact, here as well, hybrid OA journals, an APC of around over 2,000 euro, pure gold at 1,300 euro. We saw before, though, that the difference between hybrid and gold isn't really there in terms of SNP. So why should we be paying 2,200 euro for a hybrid publication? We need more control, and we need someone to try to bring down these costs. And this isn't even the full picture, because another data point that we need in here is an understanding of how much are we paying in the subscription system for access to a single journal. Because if you remember from my presentation last year, you recall that on average in the world, we're paying around 5,000 euro to access one article in the subscription system. These are data points. So if you compare what's happening in gold OA is probably more reflecting the actual cost of publishing services, right? Hybrid, you're paying for something extra and it's not really clear why. Then we have the subscription costs, which are higher. You present those data to a researcher, which every researcher should know these numbers. They should be confronted with these numbers, and they will be behind you 100% in pushing for open access. There is the ESAC initiative. I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not. I think, you're working toward. ESAC is an initiative which is focused on article processing charges, article workflows, because if we think about an open access future, I mean, already we see the concept of moving away from a big deal package, going back to the journal, but even going right down to the article level. So transactions at the article level. And ESAC is about that. And the folks that participate in ESAC have been studying and monitoring article charges, and they've come up with, in the most recent workshop, the data that was presented and the recommendations or the considerations that were made focused on the fact that, indeed, gold APCs reflect more the true costs of publishing. APCs are not really justified by value indicators like SNP, and it's the median, the average APC price points that we should be concerned about, not the outliers that are very expensive, but the average. That's where we need to monitor them. So once we have an idea of the costs involved in publishing and in subscriptions, those numbers give us the leverage then to discuss this with our stakeholders, with our administration, because if you present to them a clear picture of the costs involved and the money flowing through our institutions, that's an excellent business case to begin with negotiating a transformative agreement. Regardless of whether you have an open access mandate or policy in place or not, it's a question of money, ultimately, to an administrator. But then, of course, we need to think about the authors themselves. They are the ones who are directly involved here. So what do our researchers want? They want to publish in their favorite journals, right? They have the journals that are leading journals for their disciplines, and they want to continue publishing in them. Last year, one of the themes that I discussed was the idea that the OA efforts that have been, that we've engaged in the past 20 years have been about pushing researchers to do something new. We need to think about a strategy that allows researchers to do what they've always done, to do what they want to do, and deliver open access to them. So, understanding they want to publish in their favorite journals. At the same time, they want their work to be read and cited, right? They want the rights to reuse and share their work freely. They want to maintain their existing workflows. They don't want to have to think about it. They just want to do what they do to produce an article and get it published. They want to be able to access everything. They want access. They want to have it. That's why there is Sci-Hub, because people want just to get it with a click. And they're also good people. They want everybody to have access to science, because that will improve science. It'll improve society. That's what researchers want. So how are we going to give it to them? Or what can they do with these desires? I present this, if you've not seen it, as an example of engaging stakeholders. The University of California, a group of researchers at the University of California, based on all of those wishes that I presented in the previous slide, they got together and in their academic summit drew up a declaration of rights and principles. This is what we want from publishing, from scholarly communication. They want no more paywalls. They want no double payments. And they drew up this document, which then they gave to the university president. And with that, the libraries were then given the mandate to begin negotiating to meet the demands of their researchers. So this is an example. The drive to negotiate a transformative agreement can come from an administrative level when you present the business case of the costs involved. It could come from the researchers who, once they understand the costs involved as well, and you show them that open access will meet all of their desires for their scholarly communications, then you can get the people together and make a plan. And that is the next step, preparing a strategy for your publisher negotiations. When we think about it, you think, well, who am I, these big global publishers, and they're never going to listen to me, right? A lot of the publishers have this tactic oh, you're the only one who's asking for transformation, or oh, this works in Europe, but it's not going to work in the US, right? Well, enough of these arguments. They're not going to work anymore. That's what OA 2020 is. It's a global initiative. Publishing is global, so we need libraries to be united at a global level if we are going to have a transformation. As we think about a strategy for our publishers, we got to think about what leverage do we have. We saw before we have the money. Another piece of leverage is open access publishing, because if you look at this is from the Max Planck Digital Library, our library. We've seen that the publishing trends over the past years, there has been a significant increase in open access publishing. And what does that mean then in terms of the offer that a subscription publisher is giving you? It means that actually the value proposition of a lot of the traditional subscription publishers is decreasing, because open access publishing is becoming more important to my researchers. Preparing for a negotiation strategy, you need to think about adopting your own value metrics when analyzing a subscription offer. Here is just an example of an institution in Norway that looked at a big journal package and evaluating it not simply on counter reports. Counter reports give you some information where the usage that's happening, but when we think about what's truly important for our researchers, we need to think about where they choose to publish, or what articles are they citing in their works. Those are also important factors. And in the analysis that they've done, they looked at the download data, they looked at citations, they looked at where their authors published, they looked at the cost involved, and in the end, they got some really interesting results. They found that in this particular journal package that they analyzed, 21% of that package was not even used. There was no usage, no publications, no citations. So when a publisher presents you with their renewal offer and a 5% increase in price, you think, well, actually, the value of your package has decreased at my institution by 20%, so I think the price should actually decrease. These are powerful tools. What I'm trying to get across to you is that as librarians, we should start thinking about broadening our role. So far, our role has been provisioning access, and so counter usage data has been important. In the future, in an open access future, our role is much broader. It has to do with publication, citation. It's a broader perspective, and so we need to start including these elements in every aspect of our work. Also, preparing a negotiation strategy, one should always consider that stepping away from the table has to be an option, right? This is a PDF that is used in the Netherlands to help their researchers understand, okay, if the agreement is canceled with a publisher, how do I get the content? Well, here we have 12 different ways you could try finding the content that you need. You might have seen in Sweden already at the start of July, the subscription with Elsevier was not renewed, and so researchers in Sweden do not have access to Elsevier journals. The same thing is happening now in Germany, and I assure you, the sky has not fallen. No offense to my colleagues here. Okay, so the next step in our roadmap, leverage the transformative agreements that have gone before you. We are, as Paul pointed out, we are in a moment of change. Change is not easy, it's very scary. Transformative agreements, I call them transformative agreements, you might call them offsetting or publish and read. You might have heard about these models. I'm not involved in licensing myself, and I ask my colleagues, okay, so what is it? Give me a formula. And they say, no, there is no formula. Every single transformative agreement is new. It's an iterative process. we share information. With each new step, we push it that much further, right? So we need to, the important thing is to take a step. We have examples that have gone before us. The Wezennu in the Netherlands, they have their transformative agreements that you can look at, you can talk to them, you can understand what were the difficult points in the negotiation, what did you obtain. In Austria, they were actually the early adopters. They had the first transformative agreement with IOP already some years ago. In Switzerland now, they are beginning the process of negotiating transformative agreements. We have Deal in Germany, which you might have heard about. And here I wanted to just reiterate one concept. The idea of a transformative agreement is not that we want a business model based on APCs. That's not the point. The point is we need a transition. We are in a space right now where all of our money is tied up in subscriptions, and there's additional money flowing for open access publishing, completely unmonitored and unchecked. Nobody knows what's really happening there because it happens on an individual article basis with one researcher. We need to get to a point where the money is transparent and the money is not tied in a big deal subscription package, paywalled access, but free to flow wherever the researchers need it to flow, whether that is a journal based on an APC model, or a model or some new business model based on like Knowledge Unlatched, for example, or a new model where there is no charge and the money comes from a funder or from the university and university presses. Right now, we need to liberate that money and let it flow to where it's needed. In Germany, so the transitional agreement is a way of formally shifting the money away from subscriptions and to open access. And that's what we are trying to obtain in Germany. The idea is that in an agreement, in the process of the term of the agreement, the money is like formally called to support open access publishing. It does not support subscriptions. Access to all of the content is open, and it has to be within the current spend, not extra money for the transition, within the current spend, because we know there is already enough money in the system. This is having significant impact. This is kind of, I'm American, we talk about the shot heard round the world in the American Revolution, and this is the same thing. We are in a sort of a revolutionary phase right here, and these headlines are having their impact around the world. In the US, we've seen that they are now starting to embrace the concept of transformative agreements. The University of California, which I referenced earlier, they are preparing for transformation. Perhaps you will have seen MIT has already negotiated a transformative agreement with RSC. So it's not just a European thing where we have mandates for open access. In the US, they don't have these mandates. Every individual institution is having to take a step on their own, and they are. Collaborate and communicate. That's another key aspect of a roadmap. Some examples of collaborating. You might have heard the news of May 2nd this year. There was a high-level summit meeting on open access strategies among a small group of stakeholders. For example, the German Rectors Conference president and a representative from the funders, and from a few different countries, the UK, the Netherlands were there. They got together to say, all right, we're doing all this on our own, individually within our own countries, but we really need to spread the word. We are unhappy with the subscription model. It's time to stop. It's time to align our strategies so we can have more voice. And that was a pretty significant meeting, I think. You will see that the European University Association, in one of their recent surveys, they asked their members, who is negotiating offsetting or some form of transitional model right now with their publishers? And we're only around 15%. How many of you, how many of our members plan to start engaging in transformative agreements in the future? And they're at 63%. So this is a wave that is happening, and it's not going to stop. And now we have Plan S. Plan S, and it's very exciting that here in Slovenia, the funders have embraced this. From our perspective, this is a fantastic achievement because it is finally putting a stop to the funding of the hybrid publishing model. Hybrid was sort of invented, the idea initially was that hybrid would serve as in a phase that was transitional. But how many years on now, and we've seen that the transition hasn't happened. So it's time to stop that and start something new. We view this as a very positive measure because if at the center we have the subscription model, paywalled access, on one hand we have libraries engaging in transformative agreements, taking our money away from subscriptions and investing it in open access. On the other hand, now we have the funders who are removing the funding from hybrid. So we're coming at the subscription system from two sides now. We're getting stronger. We are aligning our strategies among the stakeholders. Whereas, just to clarify, whereas the Plan S does deem hybrid as non-compliant, there is a note in the preamble of Plan S saying transformative type of agreements may accelerate the transition to full OA, so that is acceptable. So if you choose to begin with negotiating a transformative agreement, that could technically be hybrid publication, but that is still acceptable for Plan S. So you should have no fear in proceeding. I mentioned before the summit that happened in May that served to align the strategies of this smaller group of stakeholders. Later on this year, we will have the 14th Berlin Open Access Conference, and our aim is that that is a moment of even greater alignment on a global scale. We already have, this is a picture of those who have signed the OA 2020 Expression of Interest in large-scale transformation of scholarly journals. And you see we have good representation from across the world. So I'm very hopeful that it will be a pretty exciting conference and that we will have some, yes, between ministries of research and innovation, university presidents and rectors conferences, and funders together to align their strategies even more. So that is just a brief introduction, very high level, of some of the steps that are involved in a roadmap for publisher negotiations as a means to accelerate the transition to open access. I'm done. I hope.
Thank you, Colleen. It was very interesting. We have, once again, one or two questions now. Questions for the panel. Is any question? I would like to remind you that you have also a Slido possibility to put questions via online, via phone, etc. And I have one question. During the registration process, we implement possibility to put some questions, and there were some questions, and one is maybe great for you right now because it's related to your presentation. It goes like this: is open access recently a concept which abused public finances?
No. No, I would never say that. I would say, I mean, just from where I sit, and my very brief answer would simply be, there needs to be control and monitoring of open access publishing. That is the point. Not that open access publishing is bad. We need someone to manage it. And that's exactly the role of the librarian, I would say.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Any question? No.
Okay.
If not, thank you very much, Colleen, once again, and questions after the panel.
Okay,
Perfect.
thanks.
I'm not so nice looking like Colleen, but I will stand as well. And unlike you, I will also undress. And by the way, just to start, if for Paul was early to be here at 9, for me as Italian it's also early to be here at 10:30. So I'm impressed.
Sir?
Yeah, thank you. This one.
Okay. Yeah. Just official introduction.
Yes, thank you.
Massimilliano Carloni, come from Clarivate Analytics, former Thomson Reuters. He's there from 2013, yes?
Sorry?
You worked for...
yeah, 5 years now.
5 years, yes. And yeah, with many experience in the field of management, planning, strategies, etc. So I would like to introduce also Marco Zocco. He's also our we are very glad Marco is here. And yeah, you can then after pick both of them for some professional questions maybe. Please.
And thank you very much for being here. Thank you for the organization, to university and to SKS as usual. And how can I move this one?
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. And I will start to give you, I will give you a lot of data, only data. And by the way, data that come obviously from the Clarivate solutions and platform. We are producing the impact factor, sorry. We have also subscription, sorry again. But we are not a publisher, and this is the value of probably evaluating something on an agnostic platform like Web of Science. Where we left, I was here indeed, no one reminds, but I was here on November 2017 for the ASKS in Ljubljana, I mean. And we were just announcing the partnership with Impact Story. So the partnership that allows us to integrate the data of Unpaywall, of the application Unpaywall under the Web of Science and all the solution that we have. And now I'm just here to give you, the results of this integration after almost 1 year. These are the results that have been published on Nature, by the way, a few weeks ago, if I'm not wrong, on the mid of August. So overall, Unpaywall is able to search for more than 50,000 sites, database, and so on, and find out 20 million records that are deemed to be open access. And we were supposed to find 12 million open access. As you know, also Scopus now started to integrate Impact Story. And is this true? Yeah, these are the recent, by the way, all the data that you will see has been retrieved in 1 week since now, so they are very fresh, even if they are continuously changing, obviously. So this is the situation for WAS core collection. Almost more than 10 million of records are open access. And in the overall platform, you know that Web of Science is the overall platform with several other databases. There are more than 12 million of records. And by the way, there are also 500,000 of other records that are belonging to Cielo. That is a very famous and, by the way, 100% open access platform that is not mapped here, okay? Because it doesn't make any sense to integrate Impact Story on Paywall with Cielo, given the fact that all the papers were obviously free, available. These are some snapshots in the database that we have, just for your information. You see that the adoption of the different database on the different subject area. This is a multidisciplinary database. These are databases that are very much subject specific. It's very different. And also on a regional scale, you see that there are some difference. We have some very different regional databases. And by the way, some data are very low. And this is due to the fact that in China, there is a very scarce adoption of the DOI, that is a precondition of using Unpaywall. So they have only 40% of the papers that are DOI, and by the way, they do not expose it. So this is the reasons why, basically, we are not able to retrieve the data about the Chinese databases. So databases don't show the same adoption pattern. This is indeed a snapshot in Web of Science Core collection, and exactly which is the situation in terms of the different types of open access that you can retrieve. This is again Nature. These are the numbers given by the Impastori guys, Pivovar and Priam. And these are two snapshots in the last 20 years in Web of Science Core collection and in the last 10 years. And if you look deeply, more or less the percentage of the different type of open access is always the same. Apart the gold open access, so the papers that are published on journals that are in DOIJ, that is that is growing, 50% of increase. But overall, we are around the data that you have seen even before. We have, in the last 10 years, we have around 25% of the content in Web of Science Core collection that is freely available, and all the rest is paywalled, obviously. So pure gold percentage is growing. Let's talk you the data. So let's go deeper in this, because we also have in Web of Science Core collection different indexes, as you know. We have released the Emerging Source Citation Index in 2005, so it's quite recent. It's the index of the new journals, let's say, or the journals that are not in the established historical indexes. I would say there are also the journals that have an impact factor. And by the way, I'm happy to talk about the impact factor later on. And you see that the percentage of these new journals, open access, it's much higher respect to all the other indexes that we have. And as you know, in the scientific area, the numbers are a bit better than in the other two areas. But we see that they are growing. And this is the picture of the trend of these indexes along the years. So you see that the green one, it's the S key that is going to half of the paper that are included in this index are open access. The scientific area, the STM areas of journals is quite stable. The social science is indeed a bit growing, you see, in the last 10 years. So S-key in our case. And if you look deeply to S-key, to this index, you see which are the main areas in S-key. So these are the top 10 areas overall on S-key. And these are the top 10 areas of open access in S-key. And the difference you see is that some missing social science areas then come to be, scientific areas. So what we could say, honestly, it's not the type of publication that probably drive the open access adoption. It's not the social science stuff. S-key is very much social science. But it's probably the fact that there are new journals. So recently established journals. So the key driver is publishing on a new journal. But let's even look deeply, to the data. This is the overall Web of Science Core collection and the trend, okay, for all the indexes. So we see that there are some growth along the year, and then something in some way the band is coming to be flat. This is also due to an effect that is well known. Open access is discoverable after a while. Typically, there is a time period of delay in this. But this is also more pronounced if you exclude S-key. So if you exclude the S-key journals, you see that it's coming to be very flat. So in the scientific and social science area, in the established world of the journals, seems that adoption of open access is not growing. And by the way, this is something that we never relate to this other graph, that is the growth of the journals behind, because we always say that everything is growing, but we don't think about the fact that even the number of journals is continuously growing in such a platforms. So we expect to have a growth, generally speaking, in general. So we have also last year more than 250 new journals in the historical indexes. So we are not talking about S-key. So these are journals with impact factor, but as we have seen, the growth is not growing. I mean, the open access adoption is not growing in the last years. So probably we have reached a sort of, threshold, a sort of barrier to overtake. And this is me, a very nice philosopher. Let's talk about Slovenia. This is the situation of Slovenia, okay? Same type of graph. So is the adoption of open access just 1 week ago. using obviously the unpaywall on all the records that we can flag as Slovenian on Web of Science core collections. Okay, so you see that we have a bit higher respect to the average, so 30 something in the last year, but overall Slovenia, and considering all the other former Yugoslavian countries, including Kosovo, just for you know, not creating some issues in finding out where the paper should be allocated, but you see that Slovenia is lagging a bit behind the other, you know, former Yugoslavian countries in the last 20 years. I have all the graph, all the data for all countries. But in a way, this is good, because Slovenia resembles, in a way, very much to the most, let's say, to the main European countries, because in the main European countries, the average is exactly like Slovenia, like 30-something, it's the European average. And you see that only few countries, Spain and the UK, in Europe have a larger open access rate of adoption respect to Slovenia. This is the picture for Slovenia as well, and even in Slovenia, you see that you have highest value respect to before, even in terms of arts and humanities papers. This could be due, obviously, to the fact that you have some Slovenian journals, and some of them are gold. So this is the situation overall. In Web of Science core collection, there are 45, if I'm not wrong, in doing the computation, and some of them, you see, are gold. And this has an effect, as a clear effect, if you see the production of open access papers on Slovenian journals. So Slovenian publication on Slovenian journals. You see immediately that the percentage of open access adoption here is more than 50%. So more than 50% of the papers that you publish on your journal are open access. But let's see how it happens and which are the consequences. So these are the top tier categories in which you have more open access papers in general. And this is the same type of ranking with relative number of open access papers, because before there were chemistry, there were the top categories. Here you have which are the areas with a certain threshold of papers. Obviously, I excluded the very niche areas. And you publish, if I'm not wrong, more than 100 papers, and which is the percentage of adoptions in these areas of your community. And you can immediately spot the role of the journals, because if I'm not wrong, hasn't studied in music, there are some journals published by these universities. There are some journals in these areas published by these universities that are open access, by the way. We always play the ranking game. So this is the ranking game, but there is not a winner, I would say, in the four the biggest university here. So more or less, I would say that the situation is absolutely aligned with the standard situation in Slovenia. A bit better for what concerns the Joseph Stefan Institute, that you see is over 40% of the adoption of open access. But I would say that there are no such differences. But what is interesting, because plain as it's nowadays in all our mouths, it's the type of open access adoption that you have in Slovenia. So I also have the possibility to to differentiate all the gold open access journal that we have, obviously. So just dividing them and isolating green, we consider all the rest as hybrid, let's say. Maybe this is not completely correct, but let's say gold is sure, green is sure. All the rest that is open access is included in this bucket right here. And you see that the production of your papers, in general, it's growing in terms of trend, let's say, for what concerns the gold papers. It's growing, but not so much for what concerns the hybrid. It's substantially stable for what concerns the green adoption, okay? You also need to remember, or we also need to remember, that as is done the unpaywall, there is a priority. So if there is a paper that is in both situations, for instance, it's preferred to be, it's tagged as gold and not green, but maybe it could also be present in a repository just to to tell the truth. But what is interesting and quite controversial with respect to, it's which is the types, the most used or the most adopted types in the Slovenian journals. And you see immediately then the trend is decreasing here for what concerns the gold one, but is still increasing for, or more deeply increasing for what concerns the hybrid model, whilst the green is basically not used at all. So these are more or less sort of results of what I was saying. And now, plain as from outer space, I'm a fan of the movie, and this is the situation for what concerns the funding agency nearby here. As we have understood, this Ayris is part of the 11 funding agencies signing this plan. In Web of Science core collection, as you know, it's possible to find out and to retrieve all the papers that have been funded by that association. By the way, these are all the variances that I've used, so I think it's quite consistent groups of paper, 13,000 paper funded by Ayris, and this is the situation. So if their aim is being completely open within the 1st January of 2021, we are quite far. This is the overall adoption of open access, but absolutely we are quite far if you look deeply at the breakdown per types. So we have the hybrid stuff. Let's say that it's exactly something around, that middle area that you see right here. So very far from the targets that they have pushed forward. Last but not the least, the impact of Slovenian paper on open access, because we also have quoted several times impact, and for happiness of Paul, there is no impact factor indicator that I've put just here, so I'm not gonna to measure anything with the impact factor. We are gonna measure to any single paper with several type of indicators. This, by the way, CNCI is quite similar to the SNP, source normalized impact factor, category normalized citation. It's all more or less the same, or at least the concept is the same. So we are measuring the papers respect to the similar papers, let's say. And you see which is the general trend. The general trend is that the overall purple columns are the behavior of the Slovenian papers overall, okay, all the Slovenian papers. So in average, for instance, they are almost on average with the world average in all the categories. This is the percentage of document in Q1 journals and so on and so forth. And if you look at the other columns, you see that any time that you publish open access, the columns are a bit higher. So it's true, obviously, open access is more discoverable. Now it's also more accessible, probably thanks to impact story stuff, for instance. So you have for sure a better impact in all the indicators. But if you break down the impact factor impact for gold and green one, you can also consider the difference as a hybrid if you want, you see that indeed when you publish gold, the impact is not so relevant, it's under the average of your papers. Whilst when you published green, the impact is much higher. Okay, so these are the results from the integration of an impact story of on-Pywall, as you want to call, application on the Web of Science core collection. I think that is all. As I said, all the data are available for you, for your discussion, or even, I'm not so sure if I can share and reuse the data, but for sure I can show you how to get them on Web of Science core collection. That would be the best option, probably. Oh, last but not the least, we are going also forward in the integration of impact story stuff. So I would say in the near future, you will have also the possibility to see on Web of Science core collection not only what you see right now, so gold or bronze as it's called, green publishing and green accepted. These are the three entities that you have. But you have the DOIJ gold one, so something that you can also do, like I do, just having the list of all the papers that are in DOIJ, and just copy it and then search. But you will have, you see, other type of entities in the near future on Web of Science. So all the analysis on open access, all the analysis that could bring you to have some conclusions about the adoptions, about the methodology, about the management, and so on, will be shortly available. I think this is all. I hope that this is true, and someone is indeed sleeping, but this is all. Thank you so much for the attention. Have you know, 1 or 2 questions if you want, but I will be part of the panel to defend the impact factor if you want or not.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank for a great job you did for us. I mean, we are struggling for those data, and I can say that these statistics are not boring us. This is absolutely encouraging us.
They are free, by the way, Miro. No, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, we have maybe for 1, 2 questions, and it's the same. Slido, there is a table, and then after the questions in panel. Some questions from the audience. I have one little question about Web of Science. We have license to Web of Science in Slovenia, so we are able to do this analysis by ourselves without any obstacles with licensing.
Yes, I'm not 100% sure about, you know, Web of Science is done in several different layers respect to the Scopus, so I'm not 100% sure, but this is something that Marco could obviously tell you if you have access to all the levels, all the indexes, and since 1998, where I started. Obviously, doesn't make any sense, probably have, you know, have some data before 1998 for what concern open access, meaning that obviously it's post this data, but I think so. I think that absolutely you can have access to all this data.
No, just a quick reminder, maybe the code for Slido should be...
Oh, yeah. Okay.
We have 5 questions, and on Slido you can of course address your questions, but you can also vote for existing questions. So maybe the
reinforce
Slido should be reminded.
Okay.
And to remind the 3 options for questions: simply raising hands, classic, writing questions at that table or on the post-its, and using Slido with the code 750909.
Yeah.
But on Slido you can also vote on questions that are addressed by others, so that you can help the moderator to pick up the questions. So,
okay. Yeah. So this is Slido code on the screen. So Massimilliano, thank you very much, and very welcome next year to our Focus on Open Science 2019.
Okay, perfect.
With the same presentation, maybe for 2017 or 2018. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and yeah. Sure.
Ja se bom hitro. Ne, vse kar.
Okay. Our next presentation is absolutely something new, and it's very important that it's coming from Slovenia. It is a story about first university press, which based on those, let's say, new open science models, licensing models, and yeah, Dunja is coming from University of Maribor, University Library Maribor. Probably I don't need to introduce her very detailed because we know her, but it's very important information that since last year, I think so, he leads University Press, and yeah, she will now represent her work.
Thank you, Miro. Thank you very much. I will talk today to you about our University of Maribor Press. Miro didn't give the exact information about our University Press because we are not fully open access press, but...
Oh.
Ni zvoka.
Ni zvoka.
Ne vem, pripeli so me. Boljše? Okay. So I will talk to you about our University of Maribor Press, which is in the action from end of the year 2016. We are not yet fully open access publisher. We are combined traditional publishing models and open access models, but we are trying to move fast towards fully open access, but it's not only from the leadership of the University Press what we will achieve in this manner. First of all, I wish and to take the opportunity today to thank to Dr. Paul Ayris and also to Tiberius, because 2 years ago they have helped us a lot to collect the reasons, as much as possible reasons, for our university management, to convince them that modern university presses should lead libraries or at least cooperate with them. And why is the open access most important issue in the publishing service in the universities today? So thank you very much. In the, I don't know, long-term run of 2 years, we achieved something, and I will present what have we achieved today. So, as I said, the interesting situation is that on paper, our University of Maribor Press was established in 2008, but till end of 2016 never operates. We had on the paper our University of Maribor Press, but never act till 2016. But in the end of the year 2016, our rector decided overnight, I shall say, to join all publishing activities under one roof, previously established University Press, with common ISBN number and digital object identifier, but in the traditional manner. His wish was to upgrade the quality standards of the published publications and to achieve more impact in the traditional way of evaluating system that is valid in Slovenian research area. This is impact factor based scientific evaluation. And in this action as library, which already promotes open access at our university, has seen the opportunity to promote open access publishing models. And we were glad that rector did this. Although the faculties were very unsatisfied because they thought they were taken away some independency on the field of publishing services. And this is true. Like, we cannot deny this, that faculty do not have any independency at the University of Maribor in the context of publishing their own publications. And as I said, we were glad that our previous established University of Maribor Press started to work, and the reason was the revitalization and modernization of the press and the new modern foundations of requirements of today's changing academic environment. And we saw this as this, not last, but one of the infrastructures that our university didn't have till then. As I said before, the purpose that our decision makers did that was to establish high quality standards for all University of Maribor publications. We added the purpose to offer the academic community the alternative open access publishing business model, and also to disseminate the University of Maribor Press publications as wide as possible, not only in the trying to place the metadata into a database of Web of Sciences corpus, but in all other wider possibilities that internet offers us today. Oh, sorry. Okay, and the situation today is so that formally the department still under the rectorate, but from the February 2018, the worker of University of Maribor Library leads the press. So we achieved cooperation with librarianship and publishing services at university at this way. We are still house publisher with some exceptions. Why did I write this? Because mostly publications we have published till today are the authors are from the University of Maribor. We are now also in the transition to modernize our acts of publishing in this new manner to write down, to establish open access business models within our act. And simultaneously, we are also trying as a library to achieve acceptance of open access policy. I think these two acts are related. And the main basis for open access publishing in universities. Financially are they supported by the faculties, and responsibility for editorial process is divided between faculty editorial boards and University of Maribor Press. We have publishing committee. There are 17 representatives from each faculties, and they are there for strategic decisions. And our vision is to establish, I think that this will happen in autumn this year, publishing boards for scientific fields, that this is the condition that we can cross the border of this house publisher. And as I said, from 2018, this is library-led, University of Maribor Press, and our responsibility is that we support the creation, dissemination, and curation of scholarly and other scientific works, and that we advocate open access, digital-first, new business models to enable university to gain more outreach and impact, and to facilitate researchers in publishing research output. And why I did this, to remind you that on the infrastructures we had before in libraries in Slovenia, because there are conditions that we can achieve very successful library-led publishing. Our bibliographies of researchers are unique in Europe or in the world. We are strongly integrated within cooperative online bibliographic system and services called COBIS SE. So we have control under all publisher productions of Slovenian researchers through our bibliographic catalog. All our universities in Slovenia have institutional repositories, and our institutional repositories are linked or connected with our bibliographic catalog, and also our Slovenian current research information system is connected to COBIS and our institutional repositories. That's why I said before that my opinion is that the publishing house, the publishing services as an infrastructure was this missing point in the whole picture of such infrastructures in the universities. So within our institutional repository, we have also detector of similar content. So this is the report which is made inside of editorial process for the help to the authors. And within our institutional repositories are publication published by our press, organized also as a collection. And long-term archiving we are achieving with the help of National University Library in Ljubljana, with their system through Svarog, and if it's the publication open or free access, the publication is included also in the Digital Library of Slovenia. So we have this system connected very well in Slovenia, and we have to use them. So the specialty of our library at our university is also that we are also one of the libraries which is involved in cataloging publication records. So we have this service in-house, as I may say. And we are also the second deposit library in Slovenia. So we are, and as a press, we are responsible for legal deposit issues. And as a library, 10 years ago, we achieved the Internal Act obligatory issue also for University of Maribor. So this is now the responsibility of our press. And also the service of press to other faculty libraries and university library. So the connection between those two services are very tight. Our efforts to promote and advocacy the open access at our university have some past, and we achieved that in 2014 our university signed the Berlin Open Access Declaration. So we launched the open access policy to University of Maribor. First draft was written by library staff in 2016, but unfortunately still under consideration by the university leadership. In this year we had not so much lucky to the leadership university. This is lost time. We have got the new leadership in June this year, but operating they will become now in September. So I hope that we will make some progress till the end of the year, also on the field of acceptance of open access policy. So in the library we also made a portal at Primo. This is in English, Open University of Maribor, and semantic mean is open the mind. So this is on purpose chosen such name. And what we achieve till now with open access policy, because we have in the hands a fifth version of this policy. Last year, the leadership established a group of 4 professors to revise our proposal, and it looks a little bit different what we proposed to the university, but they said, please go with small steps, something, and we will go further to make more other publications also obligatory, not only reviewed articles and dissertation theses. Our big wish in the libraries was to make textbooks obligatory to open access, but our researchers, professors didn't agree with them. With this idea, I was surprised. I think that on the field of textbooks, we should open the content to the student free of charge, but they, I don't know, they're afraid. They wish to close the textbooks inside of e-learning environments, and that's why it's here optional. We wish to we wish that whole open access policy will be accepted, and we have made some compromises. Okay, scholar communication life cycle. What is the most important thing of the university presses? Publishing research outputs as well, and facilitating dissemination, retrieval, and preservation. And those 2 acts are the most important acts of our university. This is the homepage of our university press. We are working on open monograph press, and in 1 month we will upgrade to a higher version of this open monograph press, and we will add a lot of functionalities that they are not in presence now in this version of homepage. We are publishing all publications. They're written by our authors from university. Over 100 books per year. This is a lot. At the university we have 16 journals, and 5 of them moved to the university press now. Some statistics perhaps is interesting, the language. So 63% in Slovenian language, 40% in English. The Slovenian language is a little bit limitation by choosing the peer reviewers. 40% of monographs, there are conference proceedings, textbooks, and perhaps type of edition, 50% are e-only. They are mostly free access or open access. So our main goal is now to move from free to open access. Publishing frequency per month till 2017. The summer, we don't sleep in summer because we are publishing a lot through July and August. journals, our goal is to go toward fully open access without paying APC as a diamond open access. They're already all free access and some open access, but our goal is to move to what our Slovenian open access strategy said, and also Plan S in last 14 years it was accepted, and these requests also from those two documents. Our stakeholders are researchers, conference organizers, editorial boards, publishing, and most important stakeholders are readers and users, and for them we have to spread our publications at widest, to achieve widest possible access, and to make creative delivery channels for our publications, and this is, which, as I said before, our main goal. We have to meet readers where they already are, is the principle we are following, and our publications you will find on web scale discovery service and Google Scholar, repositories, aggregators, and etc. We are aiming to obtain wide dissemination in databases that aggregate open access, such as directory open access books and journals, open library, science open. We are talking right now in the institutional repository, which is open air compliant. And as well, we have to consider also the databases as Web of Science and Scopus, because our evaluation system is based on journal impact factor, and is also an important issue in this moment. Our dissemination delivery channels, I have read them before, said there's a graphic about it, and important is also that we are legal, with legal deposit, then with open access, with our electronic discovery service, with OPAC, which is connected with other databases, in which all these stakeholders have their for wider dissemination, and with this we wish to achieve as much as possible great impact and outreach for our university. For example, Slovenian faculty and university presses are collaborating or co-parenting. This is an example of one book published by two presses, press of Faculty of Computer Science of University of Ljubljana and our press. Why am I showing you this now? Because this is an opportunity to think about some open access publishing platform, common. In Slovenia we are small, and we have to join our knowledge and resources also in this field. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dunja. Once again, questions. I have many of them. Do you have from the audience? I would like to congratulate to you and to your team and to your headquarters to support such activity. And your final slide was a perfect collaboration between universities in Ljubljana, in Slovenia, especially because we are traditionally oriented to integrated information systems here in Slovenia. But for me, I have one small question maybe about international collaboration. At the last LIBER conference, there were certain initiatives and talks about joining at certain levels joining those university press and to share knowledge, and also especially in the field of dissemination. There were talks about one unique platform at the European level, etc. Do you think about such initiatives?
Yes, yeah, I'm thinking about such initiatives, but I have a lot of work to do at home first. We have to make this university press with solid rules, and this is first task. We have to finish this year, and then we will be able to cooperate with others, and I am glad that if somebody invites us in such international collaboration, it will be great. Our example we are following is UCL Press, it is University of Stockholm Press, and many others. Many times I'm open their homepages and look for some new ideas what we should to do, but in this moment we are a very small team, 2 of us, too small. We achieve a lot for such few co-workers in our press. I am hoping that we will get some new, fresh help, that we will work faster. So thank you.
Thank you. I just want to do a short comment, if you don't mind. When we started with these events 4 years ago, in collaboration with SKS, with Paul Ayris, with all other speakers, we said that most important is that there will be some results through years. We try to follow up. And I'm very glad that this University Press, University of Maribor Press project follows some, let's say, or better to say, it's based on some somehow collaboration and some exchange of experience with Paul, especially with Tibi. So congrats to all of you for these achievements. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Hvala. So our next and the last speaker in this session is Ms. Federica Rosetta. She's coming from Elsevier. She's a director of Global Strategic Networks at Elsevier, and she collaborates a lot with strategic development with some countries in European Union and especially with Nordic countries. Federica is, we know her, she's absolutely experienced also in open access models, open publication, open science, and yeah, we are glad that we can finally have your presentation here. Please, it's your microphone, just check.
It's okay. Does it work now? Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, good. Unfortunately, I will have to hold it. Thank you, Miro, for having me here today. It's a real pleasure. I'm always in the most difficult position because I'm Elsevier after all these presentations, but all fair, what has been said, so we can just very much discuss all the issues and input you've given. Today I want to talk to you about more generically open science, but I really would like to deep going into the fair data and open data part. On the other side. Okay, so this is now familiar to you because this is what Paul Ayris already has shown before. These are the main priorities as defined by the European Commission, the working groups. A lot of attention around open access, of course, with the plan as just mentioned. The EOSC, so the plan about creating a cloud for data. The fair data, obviously, it's integrating part of EOSC. A lot of work around the metrics. So how do we actually really evaluate all this new environment in open science? Very important, though, that we also keep maintaining a good eye on research integrity. And we really focus on what is societal impact of research, so how can we really also advance that. I think what I picked from previous presentation are some important keywords. So open science, not only open access, it's a process. Ayris said it's a process, it's not going to happen, you know, from overnight. It takes so many stakeholders. Depending where we're looking into, it's complicated because of many factors. I mean, open access, it's an implementation matter now, but it's also, as Colleen said, we're looking into a transformative approach to it, and that is also not an easy things to do altogether. If you look at open data, we are really seeing how complex it is to talk about open data, because you know, data needs are different by disciplines. It requires a lot of technical skills, requires amazing infrastructure. So all of these pictures is wonderful, but really I think the message for me would be it requires collaboration, and more than that, I think it's about co-creation. So we can do a lot together, and publishers are involved in a lot of this discussion. I mean, I'm the person responsible for external relations at Elsevier, specifically in Brussels. So I do a lot of work, and I'm part of policy discussions, and we have gave quite some input in many of these topics. Because regardless of the difficult discussion happening now for this transformation, it's obvious that there is a lot of competencies that comes from a publisher like Elsevier that nowadays I would say it's more a global information analytics company, so it's really a lot of know-how in many of these fields. And when I look at open science, I think what is more obvious is that, you know, what is the end result we want to achieve? We want to create an environment which is definitely more open, more transparent, it's more inclusive, it's more collaborative. There's way more collaboration, interdisciplinarity, and there is more transparency. So this graph gives a little bit of an idea about the way we at Elsevier approach the open science framework, in the way that we have really a lot of services and a lot of product development. It's really done along the line of open science. And a lot of product development you will see in data is done together with universities. So there is a lot of co-creation going. More inclusive, more open. Of course, it's all the programs that we have around, you know, open access, green open access, the free API program, but it's also like all the open data partnerships. More collaborative. Within that, it's not only like, you know, the SSRN, so the preprint server, but it's really the opportunity that platform like Mendeley give to collaboration, but it's also the need to get also society more included in the research enterprise. So in that we have also a number, actually quite a lot of initiative to really create this better communication with society. And more transparent, I think there is a lot of work which goes through not only the metrics, so how to make metric transparency, how to ensure that we use a basket of metrics, but also how to make sure that even journals follow clear guidelines when it comes to reproducibility, for instance. And I think reproducibility, it is one of the key topics that we have as part of open science. So I just really want to give you a few slides about some of the initiatives within open science in alignment with those pillars, but really then really talking about open data or research data management, actually. So when it comes to open access, well, as all the other major publishers, we definitely have a large offer of open access options. We have more than 170 fully open access journals. 1,850 of the subscription journals offer the hybrid option. We published in 2017 27,000 open access articles in a pool of 430,000 that are under subscription model. So what is interesting to see is that, yes, open access is growing. We plan, as we do expect, to see some impact of that. But also let's keep in mind, at least for Elsevier, there is still a growth in subscription content, which is roughly around 4% per year. Green open access, I think green open access, it's really an area where we have been leading amongst the publisher in providing services to librarians to help them really make sure that metadata and content is in the repository. So we have a lot of API services, and we are some of the leading organization in the Chorus, which is the platform which was designed for the US, for the American funding bodies to facilitate basically the sharing of manuscript. We also have initiatives that are somehow linked to green open access if you want, like for instance the share link services. So when you publish with Elsevier as an author, you receive a link. The link will be active for 50 days, and you can post it in all the social networks or website and give free access for 50 days to the final published article. And just to show you something we recently launched, this is our last Gold Open Access article that was journal that was launched very recently. It's a collaboration with the Next Einstein Forum. It's dedicated to Pan-African research, development, and sustainability questions. It's subsidized by the Next Einstein Forum, so there are very low fees that are around $200, and we support it by providing the infrastructure, the technical support, and the consulting. So that was open access. If we look into instead how we communicate science to society, there are two initiatives that are part of the larger program around science society. One is audio slides. So when publishing an article, authors are invited also to make a 5-minute presentation using slides and voiceover, posting next to their article in open access. And basically this 5 minutes presentation allow really to the researcher to explain in layman terms what the research is about, and has been extremely popular, has actually really helped majorly increase the usage of the articles that are posted. And then we are collaborating with a board of NGOs across the world, where we every month select what they recognize as being research articles that have really had an impact or can have an extreme interesting societal impact. And those articles receive an award. They get a lot of media support and coverage from Elsevier, and the articles become open access on the web. Another area which is extremely important, I think a lot of the initiatives that we see will actually really work when we will have also in place not only reward system that really takes in consideration open science practices, but also that the metrics can also give a better outlook of open science practices. Our approach to metrics is that in general we always encourage to use more than one metric. So, and to use both quantitative and qualitative input. It's the concept of a basket of metric. UK universities are very familiar with our Nobel metrics. And we have acquired in the past years Newsflow, which help really generate metrics around the media coverage of research, and Planck, which really helps looking into all the alternative metrics that are possible to use. We also launched recently SciScore, which is on a journal level type of metric with the aim and goal really to make it into a very transparent way to evaluate research. And finally, I think very important also research integrity. When we are talking about alternative publication outlets, definitely open access has opened also the opportunity to create a new platform, new avenues for research. But I think that research integrity needs to remain really paramount of any new enterprise or current enterprise we have. We've seen recently a report where the number of researchers who have published in the past years in predatory journals was quite shocking. Only in Germany, 5,000 researchers are published in predatory journals, and some of them were very senior professors. So we really take good care of the life side of research ethics, plagiarism, and research integrity, there is all of a program about education and prevention. We have training modules. We go regularly to university to talk about ethics. We do invest a lot in new technologies in terms of detection of text plagiarism, statistics, image manipulation, and duplication. And we have an agreement with COPE where we get support from COPE in managing the most difficult ethical questions that arise. And then what is really interesting is the reproducibility program. It's a really large program of initiative to ensure that if we look in the future of science, how can we make sure it's reproducible? So it comes from, having proper methods described. So there is CellPress has initiated this STAR methods program to really make sure that articles also have clear, well-defined and accepted methods. But it goes also very much also in the area of data. And that's why I thought this was a good bridge for me, especially if you see there the question, have you failed to reproduce an experiment? And if you see the number and proportion of researchers that have admitted to fail to reproduce their own experiment, well, definitely there is an opportunity to look better into how we can do effective research data management. In the past couple of years, I got into data because it really became a little bit of a personal interest. So within talking about many topics, as I said, I do external relations with policymakers, with leaders of universities. But data is something that really, I thought, oh, this is extremely interesting. And so I took it as a personal thing. In the past years, I had worked at universities really to try to understand what is needed. And I got Jean-Claude Bourgermont who came over, Baron Mons. I worked with a lot of the Learn people that Polaris was involved in. So, because it's a fascinating and very complex domain, I must say. And to make it really effective, it requires really skills, it requires a lot of cooperation. It's not Elsevier by itself doing it, it's in collaboration with really the full data community. I mean, we are part of RDA, we lead some of the working group, we have been supporting FAIR data, we have contributed to the 411 data citation principle. We are initiator of the Scholix program. And one of the first steps we took was together with the University of Leiden, with the CWTS, to have an analysis that was done last year and trying to understand how researchers see the data opportunity. Because again, out of the 2 years spent going around universities, I was really entertained by the great conversation with people from the commission, on the policies, and then I was confronted with the reality of researchers saying, I'm not going to share my data. I'm like, wow, but you see the great opportunities and possibilities. So there's a lot of fear from researchers. I mean, the word, cultural change, I mean, in data, it's absolutely important. It's needed if you really want to achieve what are the big plans of EOSC, for instance. So it was very interesting to look into the results. So we asked, how many of you share data? One third of the respondents don't share data, which was actually not so bad as a response. But the point is that a lot of respondents, they share it as an appendix to publication, which is not actually the best effective way to submit your data as an appendix. It's going to be lost there, so it's not of great value. And do you see the advantages of sharing data? So most of them strongly agreed that having access to other research data, it's a benefit. I'm willing to allow others to access the research data. It's important for my research field. I rely on data from other research, and I've previously done so. So in principle, we are all in agreement. There is a value there. There is definitely a value. But, I encounter obstacles sharing my research data with others. And sharing research data, it's poorly associated with credit or reward in my field. So I think these are the two major obstacles indeed. So really, how easy it is for you to share data, and how we also, acquainted with data management. And am I rewarded for doing that? Or I'm just doing it, and guess what? I'm a little bit afraid that somebody might find something in my data which is not correct. What about it? Because we don't want negative whatever. I mean, we launched recently a journal on negative results in plant science because we got so many requests from that community. We want a journal on negative results. And we have to shut it down after not even a year because in principle everybody wanted. In reality, nobody was submitting the negative results. So in general, we don't want really to see negative. We don't want to be spotted with something which is not. So there is a fear factor, a big fear factor, but there is also indeed more like, not real support in terms of how I do that. And there is clearly no clarity on who owns right on data. I was having one of these workshops in Italy, and I asked the question, so there were library representatives, heads of different departments, and I asked, so who owns the data? I didn't get one single same answer, and they started to chat to each other. At a certain point, somebody said, there is a legislation. I was like, okay, we need first to sort out, you need to have clarity on that. I think the bigger misconception, which comes probably from open access and the fear of publisher, I don't know, which is that after you publish your data, we publisher own the data, which is absolutely not true. I mean, we don't own the copyrights on data, and we want to have open data, and the data are most of the time, in the cases, owned by the institution. It's not even the researcher. It's just really not clear in the institution very often who owns really the data. Sometimes it's the head of department, or it's the faculty. That is what needs clarity. Well, if there is no clarity in the institution, I think researcher needs to be made aware of what is the situation. And then other question was, so who do you think is responsible for acting on data management? And the question was divided in monitoring the compliance with the data management plan and then the execution of the data management plan. Well, as you can see, there is a mixed opinion about it. Many things is the department, the head or the supervisor, who has the responsibility. Some say it's the funder responsibility to do that. The research office, some things it's the IT department. Okay, the IT has a great role here when you talk about RDM. So if you talk about research data management, most of the time you're gonna have a conversation with the library, with the faculty and the IT department, because you really need synergies in between library and the IT to really get into effective RDM. Whether the IT department is responsible for monitoring the compliance and execution of data management plan, I have a question mark. But I think what is surprising to me is that they think only 10% that should be the library. And I suppose here we have a good representation from the library. So I was wondering, do you feel like that? Do you feel it is less to your responsibility, more of the others, or that is still undecided? Food for thought. But this, for me, it's a good bridge to talk about the fact that actually a lot of librarians think that they have a role there, thinks that they have, it's the evolution of their role. So, and there was this report with this analysis done by Lisa Federer from NIH about data librarianship. So asking librarians, so do you already have the competencies? Do you need special skills and trainings? And basically what came out is that she suggested that it's less the need of traditional library skills, but there is much more need now for skills to become either a data generalist or a subject specialist. And in line with this, we also did something very similar. We have the results of the survey, are not yet published. We are going to do that very soon. So what we did together with a number of institutions in the Boston area, we have surveyed on a global level librarians asking, first of all, what type of existing trainings there are for data management for librarians. And we have created an inventory, and that will be made publicly available, I think, in a couple of weeks. But we really tried to conduct a needs assessment and see what are the training gaps. So the Simmons College is taking the lead here to take the result, and together we are going to create 6 modules for librarians, created by librarians and meant for them. They're going to be open on the website. There is only a fee in the case when a librarian wants an accreditation for doing that, and that's done by the Simmons College. But this, again, it was for us a way to see, so what researcher thinks about data, what skills are needed on their side, what librarian thinks, and what's the role of librarians. From our perspective, what we started to do it's making sure that our journals are really supporting all the different and important data initiatives to make data fair. And again, let's also not confuse, not open data are fair and not offer data are open. So this is something we talk about data, but open data is not always fair and vice versa. So one very important thing is making sure that all our journals have the clear top guidelines on transparency and promotion of research data. We, of course, well, we were some of the initiator and participate in the first level citation principles. So all our journals now have implemented the data citation principle. All our journals now are able to also generate the DOI specific for data sets. You can envisage and imagine a future where also data become proper objects in scholarly communications. I had a conversation also from people, the vision that is going to be actually the other way around. In the future, the object of scholarly communication is going to be the data, and the article are going to become the supplementary material. Who knows? I mean, really, in a transformation environment, what would be the future? But in any case, so it's what we see now. Of course, the citation to data are still pretty low, so it won't be that of a value to really be used as incentive and reward at this point. But we are really wanting to promote this as an important element. And we have started to publish data articles, which are either data journal, specific data journal, or open access data articles, which are peer review of, the data are contextualized. And we do that especially because there is, when you talk about raw data, you're also talking about software, hardware, protocols, methods, lab resources, video articles. So this is really the larger set of data, not just like, the long tail. And finally, to introduce it to RDM, I think and I think this is probably, it's very much, Paul, if I'm not mistaken, also Lero is something along these lines. So very important if you really want to go into doing effective research data management and making a reality the FAIR principles. Doing data management, it's not only having a wonderful repository and storing forever and ever and having tons of data that then you don't know how to get there and pick out. You need to make sure that they are shareable, so how they are accessible, how they are discoverable. Hey, Google search, there is a need for a search, and that's also what we have started. They need to be citable, so again, they need to become proper objects for scholarly communication. They need to be review, comprehensible. They need to, you need to know the versioning, the context. They need to be reproducible, because if we do all of this, but then it's not reproducible and reusable, so they don't have the right license, well, basically, we have not really done much with the data objects. Our work in RDM has been done in collaboration with a number of universities. These universities have really contributed into the development phase. We have done a lot of case studies with them on different modules of RDM and also on different subject fields. So what we have created, looking at the research cycle, we recognize this. There is a design phase for researchers. There is an execution phase in the lab, and then in that part, you also have a preparation when you prepare your data to become ready to be published and shared. And this is one of many of these cycles that you see in a university. And all of these cycles, so where are these data? Where are they going? So what we decided to do was to create a modular system, which is based in open APIs, which here you see. So it's a modular, it's cloud-based platform that you can manage the entire research cycle. So there is a search element to start with. There is a notebook, a manager, a repository, and a monitor. So many of these elements are actually for free on the web to be used by researchers. So there is already a Elsevier search, datasearch.elsevier.com functionality on the web that you can try and see, available for researchers for free. Same things with the notebook and with the repository. There is then, and this is what I am showing here, also a version which is for institutions. And the version for institutions basically has additional functionality, as you can imagine. The search functionality, for instance, will allow you not only to search all the data within all the repositories that we have an agreement. There are 30 at the moment, and we are expanding. But it also allows you to search within your own repository and also to do private search of data that are not yet published. The notebook, well, I think I'm going to move because I have some slides specifically on some of these elements, but overall it's just really to make sure that not only you manage from searching into working in the lab and doing annotation, preparing, so doing the curation of all the content and having collaboration with the internal and external group to end up in the repository, but you also have the opportunity as an institution to monitor what happens to this data. And I think what I said, I mean, the interesting thing is that it's modules and it's free APIs. So what happens if you already have an electronic notebook, if you have already a repository, well, what we can do is just to connect the other modules that you don't have with the API into existing solution that you are already using, basically. I'm not going to go into all the modules, but I think, hey, data search, maybe it's interesting to talk about since Google just launched a competing element. No surprise, because I think data search is really something that is needed. At the moment, researchers look for data objects not really in the super efficient professional way. Many actually told me they are looking for data object and then they go in the images on Google and then they find it there and recognize. So what we did, I think, as I said, we already have collaboration and index more than 30 repositories. What is really interesting of this data search is that it doesn't do metadata search only, and that's what the Google search does, but it does deep indexing of data. So basically, it opens the files and retrieve data within that and preview the data found to authors. So I think this remains really interesting because it's another level of data search. As I said, the data manager, so once you have done all your protocols and your lab work, you can move into this data manager section, which is important for not only the phase of annotating and curating your data and making them ready to publish, but also here is where a lot of collaboration can happen. It can be internal collaboration with other institutional groups. It can be external collaboration where you invite to join your work on data. And you can use OpenAPI to basically get content also from other services and populate your manager. I want to talk about the data repository of Elsevier. It's Mendeley data. When actually researchers publish with Elsevier, we always ask, did you think about what to do with your data? Did you already post it in a repository? Great, then we link it to the repository. Don't you have a repository? You can use Mendeley data. You cannot publish your data for whatever reason, we know, privacy, etc. Just mention that. But in general, our repository has all the functionalities of creating the DOI, the versioning, and but as I said, we have so many relations with other repositories, and we still believe if there is a very specific subject repository that is excellent and existing, to go for it, because subject repository, of course, also develop very specific metadata, which are extremely useful. Data monitor, as I said, this is the added overline structure for institution, where there is an opportunity to use monitor to basically connect with researchers and send campaigns to see, okay, you are about publishing your paper, did you already think what to do with your data? And you can suggest whatever repository you think it's appropriate. So you can give some option or just leave it as a free choice. You can track the adoption of data, you can collect and edit the metadata, monitor the progress, and select data sharing options that are relevant for researchers. So it's really a way to avoid data loss in an institution, but also to get a clear understanding of what's happening with the data. And by the way, when researchers leave and the data remain there, there is also an opportunity to decide, are those data still surviving in that archive, or actually we don't need it anymore. And to conclude, I think, oh no, okay. Oh yeah. So what is also very important is that we are not doing this in isolation, but we have, well, first of all, we have an agreement with DANS for long-term preservation. As I said, we initiated the Scholix service where we link data and papers along with a lot of other publishers via OpenAir and Crossref. We have repository indexed by OpenAir. Zenodo is indexed by data search. We have agreement with DataSites, all the repositories we're working with. And in orange are the partnership we are working on now with Figshare, Open Science Framework, and of course there is the plan to integrate with DMPs. My finals, and this is also very important, all of this of course is that we are really much supporting the work around EOSC, and we are part of some of the implementation works and networks. So all of this, it's part of course, of a bigger project. To conclude, I just wanted to show a few slides where we try to look into what's so far the data output for Slovenia. We did the analysis on Saival, and we found out of 33,771 publications, 1.1% are linked to 902 data sets. And you will notice easily that the majority of the data sets are, no surprise, in the area of physics and chemistry. These are the keywords that are linked to the data sets, again, to give you an idea of what type of fields, and the journals where the articles linked to data sets are published. Again, the source is Saival, so it's not only Elsevier journals, it's our full coverage of journals. So it's a lot of physics and chemistry. And you can also see the same correlation when it comes to which repositories are now used. So again, it's crystallographic data center as the majority of the data sets that are so far published in Slovenia. My final slide is also to show you a correlation in between making data available and the citation that you can get if you have data sets available. So this is basically in the big ball, it's the publications that don't have data associated, and that's what's the field citation impact, which is around 123. And then you will see that there, the teeny tiny ball there represents the articles where the data have been made open, and you see that the field weighted citation impact is higher. That's a picture that we see across all the analysis we have done for different countries. And with that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, really, if there is any short question. Yeah, please, Anna, go.
Okay, so my question is regarding this process of publishing the data in the repository, and is there any peer review process, quality control for the quality of data that is uploaded, the control of methodology, or...
Yeah, I think you raise an important point, because except for the data journals where there is some peer review and more control, I think there is not yet a quality seal for data. And there is a RDA group which is actually looking into that, because at the moment we don't have something like that really define what's the quality. But you have a quality stamp at the moment only on repositories, for instance. So that's the level.
Because that's very important for the reusability of the data.
Absolutely. And also, how complete are the data? And I mean, for usability, as I said, it's also like, having information like, the provenance, the context, there is much more. So I agree that there should be a quality mechanism, and I'm sure it will come.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for
Welcome.
this presentation. Now we have a certain delay. I suggest that now it is a coffee break, refreshment, water, sandwiches outside. I suggest that we start at 12:30, so half an hour. And then we cut maybe those closing notes. We have 15 minutes. This is like, you know, maybe a possibility that we close our event today shortly, because those presentations was really very interesting. So please enjoy in sandwiches, and after 30 minutes we start again.